are a god, and we want you to believe that we are a god and worship us. I don't believe you for a second, but I have a necklace. The evidence is all around you. You have to look for it, yes. Not over there, not over there. Where the bleep is this evidence? I don't see anything. You're just not looking right. Look harder, okay? And that's why the lobster is the true god. See, unlike the turtleists who won't offer you actual evidence, it's right there. It's a freaking lobster. What more do you need? Special pleading. Look at it a certain way and you'll see the evidence. Clearly, it wasn't there. The guy looked and he didn't see anything. Alright. Moving on. Deconverted man here. Let's see, what is there to analyze? Let's check out this.
The Comfort Zone with Ray Comfort.
The bleep with that! Give me something else!
I think I have found the candidate for the worst atheist video of the year, and it comes from Anti-Citizen X. In the video, he attempts to debunk the fine-tuning argument, and ironically, he has been getting a lot of accolades for the video, but some of the objections he raises are so bad that I'm just gonna have to play his video.
Dang nabbit, what do I gotta do to be on the list? I mean, like, I have a lot of videos, I have a few subscribers, and there wasn't even really a list, was there? It was just like, let's just get Anti-Citizen X, who already is famous. Oh, look, I mispronounce socialism all the time. I don't even care that I mispronounce that. In other words, I mispronounce. I don't even care. And people are like pointing it out, trying to correct me, trying to make it right. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I don't care. It's how I say words. Deal with it. And I just keep going anyways. What? You could make fun of me. What about me? Oh, sorry. Back to the video.
Let's not forget that in the context of synthetic propositions, it's nearly impossible to ever philosophically prove a negative claim.
I can't believe how many atheists reiterate the oft-repeated assertion that one cannot prove a negative. Negative claims are quite easy to prove. I can prove right now that there is no elephant in my room.
Which is not a negative claim. I know the word no is in it, so it might seem like a negative claim to somebody who doesn't understand what a negative claim is, but it's not a negative claim. So what would be a negative claim? First and foremost, you have to understand that a negative claim is a universal claim, and not universal referring to the universe, but referring to knowledge that we humans possess on the world scale, okay? It is something that is true everywhere. That's why we call it a universal claim, okay? Alright, so let's take the James Randi Foundation for a good example of this. They have never, to my knowledge, said that there is no such thing as powers that humans can possess, although James Randi himself might have said that. The Foundation has not said that. They say, we will test you. We want you to prove that this is true. And until you demonstrate that it's true, we are skeptical that it exists. There's no reason to think that it does exist until somebody somewhere demonstrates that it does exist, and we're offering a very, very substantial reward for doing so. So there is no extrasensory power. There is no ESP. That's the universal negative claim. But we can't prove that because we haven't examined every single human. We haven't subject every single human to a test. And doing so would not work because it has to be their will. They have to be desiring to do the test. Otherwise, it's not going to work. If you force someone to do something, they might not do that thing just to spite you. Plus, there's all the humans that have mental incapacities for whatever reasons, that you would be unable to test for those reasons. So one could always say that it was that one person or two people that you couldn't test or didn't test that had ESP. So that's the problem, is the testing of the negative is beyond our ability, and even if we do it, the person that claimed the positive can always move the goalpost back. So when you say there is no elephant in my room, even though it sounds like a negative claim, it's actually a positive claim. I know it's hard to understand for somebody that might not understand logic, which I strongly suspect you don't, but let me walk you through it. You see, it's not a universal claim. You have one room, and we know what an elephant is, so we can look in your room and we can see that there is in fact no elephant there, and you yourself can also look in your room and say that yes, there is no elephant in there. It's very simple. It's not a universal claim. A universal claim would be, again, elephants can fly. That's a universal claim. And the negative is elephants can't fly. That would be the negative. So prove that elephants can't fly. Well, you might say that should be easy. I can just go to physics. I can show you that the dynamics of elephant are not something that would allow it to fly. But you don't have proof that it's not true. You have an indication that it's not true. You can never prove the idea. It's just not possible because of the nature of the universal. That there could be that one elephant that breaks all the rules. That's the thing that the person that claims the positive could decide is the case. But what we decide is that we have never seen an elephant fly. We know how physics works, for the most part, I would think. And there's no reason to think that an elephant could fly. So what we wait on is not the negative, we wait on the positive. So if somebody wants to say that an elephant can fly, all they need to do is show an elephant that can fly within controlled conditions. That way we know it's not just a trick. Okay? The burden is on the positive claim. There is no way to prove a negative. It's not that difficult. There you go.
Absence of evidence becomes positive evidence for non-existence if two philosophical criteria are met. Number one, evidence expectation criteria, which means that if object O existed, then we would expect there to be evidence for it. Number two, knowledge expectation criteria, which means that if there were evidence for object O, we would expect to have knowledge.
I would really like you to cite your sources here. Where does this idea that you just presented come from? You said that this is the criteria. Okay, fine. Who said that? What philosopher where said that? How many philosophers have agreed with this proposition? Or is this just something that you're going to state as if it is true? Okay, but I'll grant you the benefit of the doubt and go along with this as if it is the way that we decide such things. So, evidence expectation criteria. So, if this object, whatever it might be, then we would expect there to be evidence for it. Okay? So, what's the criteria, and what's the expectation about that criteria, and how does any of that work? Is that subjective? Do I personally get to decide what the criteria is and what my expectations of the criteria is? Is it set by somebody else? Is it set by the claim itself? How does this work? How does this function? I don't know. No idea. I'm not given anything to go on here. So this seems rather subjective to me, but okay. What about number two? knowledge expectation criteria. And then if there is evidence of this, then we expect to have knowledge of the evidence. How does that work? Why would that be true? Why? Where? Can you explain further? I don't really get this. So let's take these two things. So biological evolution, something that creationists deny, is something that's got demonstrable evidence for it, and we can demonstrate that, and we can do tests, and we can show that this works, but yet they'll deny it anyways. So they don't seem to have knowledge of the evidence, even though it's right there. The object, in this case biological evolution, is true, and there's evidence, and we're presenting it to them, but they're denying it anyways, so this doesn't really work for them, even though it should work for them. So we have a counterexample that this formula doesn't always work in all situations. That may be a problem. And, of course, then we have what we're talking about, the concept of God. Who's God? I don't know. It depends who you ask. So different versions of God, different concepts of God are going to have different criteria that the people proposing that God set up for us already. So I guess they, who made the proposal, get to make that criteria. So whose expectation? Well, if we listen to them, as we have to anyways, then I guess it's their expected criteria. But then how do we decide which one of them has the right God concept? Or do we have to examine every single one of them individually to decide this? How does any of that work? I don't know. But let's just go with the classical philosophical concept of God, that it's everywhere and that it knows everything. Okay, let's just leave those two things as the basis. The whole being able to do anything may or may not be in there. But it's everywhere. At least that. We'll have that. Well, if it's everywhere, why can't we detect it? I would think that something that's everywhere would be demonstrably evident to everyone at all times. But that might just be my subjective expectation, so you can dismiss that and say, well, Deconverted man, he doesn't get it. He's not covering my God. He's covering a abstract philosophical concept of God. So don't listen to Deconverted man. Okay. So what is your concept of God? Is it the Christian God? Is it Allah? Is it some other God? I don't know. But my expectations can always be waved away, because I expect there to be evidence, abundant evidence, of this God. But you can always just say, well, your expectation is wrong. We have the evidence. You're just not looking at it the right way. So going to the whole, quote, fine-tuning, end quote, idea, which isn't an argument at all, by the way. We'll get into that later. The expectation is, for me, is way bigger than just having a fine-tuned universe. If indeed we have a fine-tuned universe. If in fact fine-tuning means what you think it means, which it doesn't. So that's not enough for me, but it is enough for you. So right there on point 1, we're already in disagreement because we didn't know how point 1 worked. Because you didn't take the time and energy to explain these things and how they work. And we'll never even get to point 2, but I do expect to have evidence of God, but I don't. I just don't. If there's a different alternate explanation available, it's not that I'll just grab onto it because it's there and I like it. It's that I have to be willing to consider all the possible explanations until I use all the methodologies available to me to deduce which explanation is true. And I may never get there. This is the difference between the scientific approach and the theological approach. This is also the difference between the scientific approach and a deductive argument approach. What you're trying to do is create a deductive argument for the existence of X, in this case it's God, using logic to get there. And I love logic, and I stand by logic, and I promote logic, but the problem is that logic has its limits, and this is one of those limits. You can't use a deductive argument to make something so. You can only use it to show that it's logically coherent, but only if the premises are also logically coherent. And for the fine-tuning argument, they aren't, because the argument's not even an argument. And I still need to pause on explaining that more, because I'm not done with telling you how wrong you are yet. Okay, so we have the universe. We all agree on that. And we have possible explanations of how it came to be, or why it is, or however you want to put that. And the scientific approach is to say, well, let's try to figure it out. Whereas the deductive logical approach within theism is to say, well, we have this, therefore it's got to be that. And meanwhile, the skeptics and the scientists are shaking their heads saying, no, that's not how that works. Even if it was valid, it still wouldn't work, and it's also not valid. So, the thing that I've been putting off is the fine-tuning isn't really even an argument, because the word fine-tuning doesn't mean that the universe is tuned at all. What does it mean? Well, guess what? You don't know. You have zero idea. And if you're listening to my video and you're waiting for Deconverted Man to explain it to you, you'll be shocked when I don't. And here's why. I want you to look it up. Look it up via Google Scholar. Look up fine-tuning. And find me scientific, peer-reviewed, published papers talking about fine-tuning. Find me them. And then explain what it is. And then explain why that proves God. You do that because the burden is completely on you to demonstrably demonstrate that this is a true thing from start to finish. And you have not done so. For the rest of you who might already know what fine-tuning is not, still, I want you to do that research. Because it's important for us to be educated. It's important for us to know. Yes, maybe I should have some burden to educate you on the matter. And if I was making a video about fine-tuning, then I would do so, because I would be obligated to teach you. But here, my obligation is to show you the logical fallacies, which I'm doing right now. He has failed to give us an argument. He has failed to explain the argument. And thus, we have a formal fallacy. Now, normally formal fallacies only indicate to us that the person doesn't understand logic. But when the formal fallacy is failure to give an argument, then the conclusions are just dismissed. Poof. We don't get to be skeptical of any of it. None of it matters because we weren't even given an argument. So we just go, yeah, that's nice. That's your opinion. I don't care. It's dismissed. We just don't pay attention to it anymore. We're done with it. And we go, look, give us an argument, at least. You haven't done that, so go do that. Because you're saying fine-tuning in a way that is not meant to be used. That already, we're done with you, we dismiss you, we're done. Moving on. However, some people, like Anti-Citizen X, decided, you know what, we'll ignore the whole you failed to give us an argument thing, and we'll pretend like fine-tuning is really a thing anyways, and explain to you why that doesn't work anyways. But instead of listening to that explanation, you try to justify your logical fallacies with more logical fallacies, making this video worse than his video. Now, I don't know that you're the worst out there. There's been far more fallacies, certainly by many, than you. But at any rate, yeah, you kind of you failed. So no, explain all this stuff, and then maybe you'll be able to make your points. But I doubt it.
It's not hard to prove a negative assertion. If these two criteria are met, then we can use absence of evidence to prove a negative assertion quite easily.
No. And I just explained to you why, and I'm done. I'm done. There's nothing. I can keep going on this video for like an hour, explaining why every single point that this guy makes is wrong. But I'm going to stand by my failure to give an argument stance. Because although we're presented with things that sound like an argument, we're never given an argument from the get-go, because fine-tuning doesn't mean the thing that he thinks it means. And without that understanding presented in his video, I get to dismiss the entire thing. Further, absence of evidence is sometimes evidence of absence. And what's interesting about that is it is something we can challenge within logic. And I would ask you where the phrase absence of evidence is evidence of absence comes from, and why we have that as an idea, and how that very phrase proves that you cannot disprove a negative. Think about those things as I say the following. Unless and until we have an argument, we have to dismiss your conclusions.